Bueno, muy buenos días a todos y bienvenidos al webinar de
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar for Innovative Instruments to Finance Climate Action in Cities. This is the third webinar on Latin American and Caribbean cities on COP28. I am Maria Camila Uribe. I am the coordinator for IDB Cities, and I am very happy to exchange knowledge on how to promote integration regarding innovative instruments and how we can do better climate action. To start, this webinar will take place in Spanish today, but you can hear it in English or Portuguese.
Solo tienen que hacer clic en el icono de mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y escoger el idioma de su preferencia. Yo speak the
You
language
just have
you want to hear in the symbol of the world down on your screen. And você pode escolher o idioma ou sua preferência no símbolo do mundo na parte debaixo del menú. En caso de tener alguna pregunta para los
Should you
panelistas,
have a question for the panelists that we have today, which are very interesting, you can go to the Q&A section and the panelists will answer the audience questions at the end of the session. I'd like to remind you that the recording of this webinar will be available at the IDB YouTube channel next week. In the chat, you can find the channel's link. For those who joined for the first time, the Cities Network of the IDB facilitates the exchange of knowledge, solutions, and good practices between Latin American and Caribbean cities. The network generates dialogue opportunities between different actors of the private sector, public sector, the academia, and they are part of more than 250 city members. We take advantage of the knowledge that is generated. This way, we strengthen leadership in urban management, capacity building with municipal officers, and promoting synergy with allied institutions to get more information or to sign up your city in the network. You can use the link that we are sharing in the chat. This year, we have 4 series. This is the first series, the one that we finished today. And then in May, we will have strategies to promote social housing in Latin American and Caribbean cities. Then we will talk about pollution. And finally, in October, it will be on strategies for biodiverse cities. Also, in the links, you can sign up for the newsletter that we have to give you information on the work that we do at the housing and urban development at the bank. All of the webinars have been recorded. If you want to hear the prior recordings, you can do it. Without further ado, the series that we're finishing today for Latin American cities and Caribbean cities after COP28, we want to address important topics on the climate agenda to move forward with the cities. During the first webinar that took place 2 Wednesdays ago, we talked about the importance of multi-level coordination to drive climate action in cities, how the contributions, the national contributions, may offer opportunities to align the cities with this strategy, and how the climate agenda can be aligned with the work that we do in the cities. On that webinar, we highlighted the need to coordinate the importance of coordinating different levels of government to promote resilient
Tuvimos un ejemplo
cities. We
tuvimos un
had
ejemplo
an
en ese
example
webinar
during that
que fue muy
webinar,
interesante
which was very
sobre el
interesting,
proceso de coordinación
regarding
para
the
el desarrollo del
coordination
proyecto
process for the
climático
development of
de la
climate
ciudad de
change
Valdivia,
for
en
the
Chile.
city of Valdivia in
La
Chile,
colaboración entre diferentes
the
niveles de
cooperation
gobierno,
between different
cómo
government
eso
levels,
maximiza los
and how
recursos
this
y mejora la
maximizes the
respuesta
resources and
climática
promotes a
ante
more
los desafíos
effective answer
globales.
regarding climate
Si
challenges.
quieren verlos, ahí
If
están
you want to see
grabados
them,
en la
it
página,
is
en
recorded
la página
in the
de IDB.
IDB YouTube
El
page.
segundo,
The
fue el
second
miércoles
one,
pasado, que tal vez
last
algunas
Wednesday,
ciudades estaban en
some
vacaciones, en
cities were
receso,
on vacation,
fue sobre la equidad climática
was on
en las
climate
ciudades.
equity in the cities.
Resaltamos la necesidad de
We
implementar una
highlighted the need
estrategia
to
de
address
acción
gender
climática urbana.
disparities in
Hemos
urban
conocido cómo el
climate
cambio
action.
climático afecta a las
We also
mujeres y
talked
a las
about
niñas,
climate change and how
sugiriendo
it impacts
respuestas
women
justas y
and girls,
equitativas. Y sobre
suggesting
todo
equitable
sobre
answers. And
una
we
perspectiva de
talked
género en
about
proyectos
a
climáticos
gender
que promuevan
perspective
más la equidad
agenda
y
that
la
promotes
resiliencia urbana.
equity and urban
Igual pasó en Chile,
resilience.
Brasil
We
y
saw the
India.
case of Brazil and
También
India.
la colaboración efectiva y la
Also,
implementación de
the effective
políticas públicas
cooperation and the implementation of
necesarias para un mundo
inclusive
más justo
policies
y
will
situar
lead to
de nuevo
m-
el cielo
fairer
para abajo.
future.
Bueno,
And if you
pues
want
esos
to
fueron
watch
los
it,
dos
it is
ejemplos.
recorded.
Hoy
Those were
en
the
este
two
vamos a hablar sobre las estrategias
webinars. And today we're going to
efectivas
talk
de
about the
financiamiento
effective
climático
strategies
institucional
for
para realizar
financing climate
los, las
action
metas climáticas
so that we
globales
can
y
move
buscar la
forward with
resiliencia.
climate goals.
Entonces, empecemos con el
So
webinar
let's
de hoy.
start with
Hablamos sobre
today's
estos
webinar,
instrumentos
and we'll
innovadores.
talk about these innovative
Ya les habíamos
instruments.
comentado
This
qué
is
es
a
el
topic
conocimiento y
that
las
will
habilidades
allow us to
disponibles en
increase
clima.
knowledge and the
En el
available
webinar de
tools.
hoy vamos a conocer los desafíos y
In this
oportunidades para
webinar, we
promover el
will see
financiamiento
the
climático en
challenges and
ciudades.
opportunities for
Además, como
urban
siempre, vamos a presentar casos
to climate
concretos de
action. We are
ciudades de la
going to
región
present
donde
concrete
se
cases
trabaja la inclusión de
in
la
cities in
perspectiva
the region
climática
where we
en el
talk,
presupuesto
where
municipal
we
y en la
have
implementación de
the
instrumentos financieros
implementation of
innovadores
financial
para atraer la
innovative
inversión
instruments
privada hacia
to
proyectos
attract private
climáticos.
investment
Esperamos que
for
estas
sustainable
experiencias
projects. We
sean
expect
muy de
that these
inspiración para sus
experiences
ciudades,
will
para
be
el
an
financiamiento
inspiration
de
for
sus
your cities
iniciativas
to look for
para el
effective
cambio
financial
climático.
solutions for climate change.
Ahora voy a presentar
Now I'm
los
going to
participantes que tenemos hoy.
present the participants that we
Hemos
have
estructurado la
today.
sesión.
We have structured
Vamos a
the
empezar con una
section.
conversación
We're
con un
going to
panel
start with
conversation
a
entre
conversation
expertos
panel
para
between
profundizar sobre la relevancia de la
experts
acción
to
climática con
talk about the
esta
relevance
aproximación.
of
Y contaremos
this
con
approach. And
Francisco Macedo,
we will
es
have
asociado del programa
Francisco Macedo, who is an
Climate
associate to the
Policy Initiative
Climate Policy
de
Initiative
CPI.
Program from the
Bienvenido,
CPI.
Francisco.
Welcome,
Tenemos también a
Francisco.
Alfredo
We also
Villavicencio
have
Vieira,
Alfredo
él es
Villavicencio
analista de
Vieira, who
evaluación
is an
del
evaluation
Climate
analyst
Investment Fund.
for the Climate
También muy
Investment
bienvenido,
Fund.
Alfredo,
Welcome,
a la
Alfredo.
sesión.
Thank you for being here.
Posteriormente tendremos las
Then we will
presentaciones.
have
Primero
the
empezaremos con
presentations. We'll
Patricia
start with
Sánchez,
Patricia
quien es
Sanchez,
secretaria de
who is the
Hacienda de la ciudad de Mendoza,
Secretary
en
of
Argentina.
Housing in
Muy
the city of
bienvenida,
Mendoza,
Patricia.
Argentina. Welcome,
Hoy
Patricia.
también
And
tendremos
we will
el
have
gusto de escuchar al
the pleasure
secretario
to
de
hear
Hacienda del
the
Estado de Baja California,
Housing
México,
Secretary of the
a
Baja
Marco
California
Antonio Moreno
State in Mexico,
Mexía.
Marco Antonio Moreno
La
Mexia.
introducción con un espacio para
We will
responder
finish the session with the
preguntas en
space
nuestro
to
chat.
answer
Así que les invito
questions in the
a
chat.
que
So
nos vayan
I
haciendo las preguntas
would appreciate your questions in
en
the
el chat.
Q&A section.
También me parece
Also,
importante mencionar
it is
que
important to
tendremos hoy
mention that
la
today
moderación
we will
por
have
parte de
as
Mariel Juárez
moderators
Olivera.
Mariel Juárez
Ella será la persona que
Olivera. She
moderará
will be
nuestro
the
panel de
moderator
hoy.
for
Ella es
our
especialista
panel of
de la
today.
División
She's
de
a
Cambio
specialist for the
Climático
climate change
del BID y
department
tiene
at the
también la
IDB,
titulación
and
de
I would
MBA.
like to
Antes de
welcome
pasarle la
her.
palabra a Mariel,
Before
que será
giving the
nuestra
floor to
moderadora,
Mariel, who would be
quiero
our moderator,
aprovechar
I would
un
like
poco esta
to
conversación para
take
escucharlos
advantage of this
y que
conversation to
todos podamos ver
listen to you so that we
en
can
dónde
all
están
see
nuestras ciudades. Y la
where
primera
our cities
pregunta la
stand. And
hacemos
the
con
first
Ana, que
question,
el código, el QR
please
para que
scan
puedan
this
ir a
QR
la
so that you
votación
can
y podamos entre todos
vote.
ver qué entiendes por
Is
financiamiento climático. ¿Cuál es
what do you think climate
a qué se
financing
refieren
means?
cuando cada uno
What
escucha
do
qué es
we mean
financiamiento
when
climático?
we hear climate financing. What do you think is the meaning of that? Please put your answers in this QR link. Please scan the QR code and start voting.
Movilización de recursos para mitigación y adaptación.
Inputs for mitigation works or adaptation to climate change, moving resources to mitigate and adapt, instruments and mechanisms, financing instruments and mechanisms to mitigate and adapt to climate change, financial support to make policies viable. We have several answers.
Bueno, ahora me gustaría que pasáramos a la segunda pregunta.
Well, right now, let's move on to the next question. How important is it to promote climate financing in cities from your perspective? How necessary or how important do you think this is from the local government perspective? Here we have some answers.
Bueno, y finalmente,
And finally, what is the main challenge to increase climate financing in local governments, in subnational governments? We have some alternatives here, and we would like to know from your vision, which ones do you think? Lack of technical capacity or solid projects. Second, lack of urban planning. The third one, lack of capacity to execute projects. Four, lack of coordination among government levels. And
allí pueden, ya.
And the last one is lack of information.
Siguen creciendo. Creo que las
Well, the numbers are growing. This is a very interesting response. With this rich agenda and with these answers, I will give the floor to Mariel, who will moderate today's conversation. Welcome, Mariel, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Maria Camila, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be with these experts. As you mentioned, the first panel will be to discuss with Francisco Macedo and Alfredo Villavicencio how, based on their experience, how can we improve climate financing at the local level?
So thank you so much, Francisco, for joining us today. And I would like to know more about your experience working with CPI, but also as in your experience leading several initiatives with the city's Climate Finance Leadership Alliance. We would like to know more about what are the opportunities and challenges that you can see in scaling up climate finance at the national level. And if you can also let us know more about the tools and other, analysis that you are doing there, and how we can use this as an experience for other, not only other organizations, but also other cities that would like to access to climate finance.
Thank you very much, Marielle. Thanks everyone for being here with us today. Marielle, just a quick question. How much time do I have to answer this question?
Let's say that 7 minutes for because I made a lot of questions in one. So I think it's, yes, for the opportunities, challenge, and any tools and analysis that you see we can highlight in this discussion.
Fantastic. So try to be brief and straight to the point, because 7 minutes may seem like it's a lot, but it's very complicated questions. So I think just to give you a bit more background about CCFLA. So CCFLA is the main platform for multi-level and multi-stakeholder coalition, really aiming to support the ecosystem for urban climate investments worldwide. This means that we don't work directly with cities, but we work with all different kinds of institutions that are helping implement urban climate infrastructure on the ground. This means that we work a lot with MDBs like the IDB, but also we work with private investors, we work with city networks, United Nations systems, think tanks, and so on. And the way we work with our members is usually around three main pillars that we think that are really essential to help scale investments at the urban climate finance. So basically, the first thing we do is knowledge. So we do quite a lot of work around reports, tools, and policy briefs to help our members learn more about innovations, challenges, and opportunities around urban climate investments. So, for example, we have launched a very interesting piece last year on the MDB reform and how to raise the profile of the urban climate finance discussions in the international climate forums. Previously, we launched quite a lot of work around net zero carbon buildings, financial aggregation. So these are just some of the topics that we have been covering around these years. Then we do quite a lot of work around collaboration. So we're working a lot with our members in terms of meetings and workshops to really help connect these institutions we are working with. Just for you to have an idea, I'm talking here about 86 different institutions that we are working with at the global level. So we're trying to bring them together to help bridge supply and demand for urban climate investments. And we do a lot of work around advocacy, especially in terms of coordinating messages of our members ahead of main climate forums like New York Climate Week, COP, but also World Urban Forum. And we also do quite a lot of work in helping give, let's say, technical input to our members to really support their advocacy efforts around these forums. So in a nutshell, we don't work directly with cities, but cities are the ultimate beneficiaries of our work. And I think also they can benefit a lot from the reports that we have available on the website, as well as the tools which sometimes also have city officials as a target audience. I think just to mention two tools that we have on our website, I think could be relevant for this audience is the Priority Operation Resource Directory that can help cities identify the right priority operation facilities to support them develop their projects, and the Financial Instruments Toolkit Library, which provides an overview of the different financial instruments available for cities that they can use to finance their urban climate infrastructure. Thinking here more about the challenges that we have been seeing and the solutions, right, for scaling urban climate investments, I think we have to put things in the perspective and really think that, well, cities are home to around 57% of the global population, meaning that municipal governments must respond to demands and needs from over 4.5 billion people. So that's a lot. And we see a lot of challenges coming here, for example, from the demand side, but also from the supply side. And here I'm using demand and supply in terms of funds, right? The demand side, which is usually the side of cities, we see that there are challenges that are linked to governance structures and a technical capacity to help define the projects that are needed for them. I think this is also reflected in the poll, so it's very interesting to see how our perception also aligns with our colleagues are seeing and reporting here in today's call. So thinking here about the demand side, we see that the usual process for identifying the right urban climate infrastructure for each city usually follows a sequence of planning, prioritization, financing. More specifically, we first see that there's the development and integration of spatial and strategic plans. Here, for example, I'm talking about the local climate action plan, so trying to integrate all these plans together. Then from this planning stage, prepare a capital investment plan to help identify the urban climate infrastructure and service priorities that can help address the needs identified in these integrated plans. And after that, there's a need, of course, to create a budgetary plans to help determine how investments can be financed. And here we can talk about own source revenue, transfers from national governments, or even private sector. The issue is that implementing this process is hard and complex, requiring alignment with national strategies, high political will from city officials, great collaboration between city departments, technical expertise to develop these projects, and high level of financial literacy to implement innovative financial instruments. So that's on the demand side, right? On the city side. We also see a lot of challenges coming here on the supply side. And we see these challenges perhaps clustered around two main levels. The first one being the enabling framework and then the product level. At the enabling framework level, which typically refers to regulation and policies, we see that cities don't really have the power to enter that market, or they have low or even no credit rating, which makes it very hard for them to access other sources of finance other than within their own source revenues or national government budgets. On the other hand, we see also that these financiers and investors often don't really have the mandate to invest in urban climate infrastructure assets, which can be considered to be either too small or too risky for them. So I think there are a couple of challenges related to the enabling conditions here for financing these projects. Then you can also look at the project level, where we can really see there are challenges relating to how products are really designed and developed, and meaning that many times they are not considered to be bankable, meaning that their risk profile is not attractive, either because it's too risky or the revenue is not too high, or even because the ticket size is too small for potential investors. And I think here it's very important to highlight the work that participation facilities, which are typically hosted by IDBs or city networks, can really help play a key role, very crucial to help cities develop more of these bankable projects. So now looking forward a bit more to what are some of these solutions, right? I think that first things first, developing this logic of planning, prioritizing, financing is essential, but it's also very, very hard, right? And I think the first thing to have in mind here is that, again, local climate action plans, they need to be aligned with plans from all the levels of government, such as national and states, to ensure consistency, coherence, but also to help mobilize investments. This really helps decrease risks associated with financing these projects. And having said that, great local climate action plans also have a lot of things to consider and reflect on, right? I think first thing, they need to really reflect on the greenhouse gas emissions from the city. So it's very important to have an inventory of greenhouse gas to really understand where emissions are coming from. Second, it's super important to understand the climate change vulnerability of the city to see who's really impacted by climate change. Third, is very essential to consider a clean energy transition plan to see how to reduce energy emissions, which typically represent most of emissions in cities. Also, carbon pricing should be part of this analysis to understand how to best internalize the cost of greenhouse gas emissions into decision making. And fifth, to consider also just transition, right? Which is super important to ensure that no one is left behind when climate action plans are being implemented. What we see is that developing these plans with all these elements is not an easy task, and there are multiple resources that partners can use to leverage and implement this kind of climate action plans. And here, I would typically recommend to cities to reach out to city networks like GCLOM, ICLE, C4 that you know quite well, and MDBs like the IDB. They can really help build technical capacity and guide cities throughout this process. Then going from the climate action plan moving forward, one of the main challenges that cities face is translating their ideas into action investable projects, and partners like city networks and MDBs can really help them in this process. I have a couple of examples here to talk to you about, but I think we might be at time, so I'll rush a bit more, but happy then to talk more about what are some good examples you see in this front. But I think what's very important here when developing these projects is to ensure that they meet financiers' interests, right? In the end, you're trying to get money to implement infrastructure. So you need to ensure that whatever you are developing is interesting for whoever will be financing it. So here, something that we have been seeing as very crucial is to really engage as early as possible different potential finance sources to help adjust projects or financial instruments to their requirements, right? And you see this, for example, being particularly relevant in the case of PPPs or land value capture instruments. And finally, just to close, I think I'd like to say that some financial instruments can also play a key role in really helping cities integrate climate policies effectively into their financial planning. And that's the example that's the case, for example, of green municipal bonds, which can be used as one single financial instrument that can help implement fundraise for entire climate action plans, bringing a lot of transparency to how these proceeds are being used, to the infrastructure that is being financed, in a very effective manner, also to raise funds from a wide range of stakeholders. And bonds, just to conclude, I think is a very interesting mechanism because they help aggregate projects. And again, is one of the main challenges we see for scaling urban climate infrastructure investment is the ticket size of projects. So by bundling projects together, which is the case of bonds, you are able to tap into new investors, right? Because they're typically more used to investing in bonds. But also you help achieve economies of scale, lower unit transaction costs, meet minimum ticket requirements for institutional investors like DFIs, but also private investors. And just to conclude, I'd like to say that we have launched a report last year about financial aggregation that I'll definitely recommend those interested in the topic to take a look at. The report is called Financial Aggregation Blueprints for Urban Climate Infrastructure. And in this report, we present and analyze a series of financial blueprints based on case studies of municipal pool procurement, green bonds, and municipal insurance pooling developed by cities worldwide to really help inspire efforts of mainstreaming financial aggregation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Francisco. I think it has been very clear, and we got a lot of good insights from you in terms of the demand and supply challenges. And it's very clear that on the demand, when talking about cities, it's one of the main challenges, the technical capacities, right? And also to identify the right interventions in terms of resilient infrastructure, for example. And in terms of the supply, to create enabling frame environment, right? So there can be other investors that can be interested in financing climate interventions at the city level. And in terms of the solutions, I think the main takeaways is that there is a need to close the gap between the local climate actions plans, but also they need to be aligned to the national action plans as well, but also how they can create, right, like actual interventions, like how the interventions in terms of mitigation or adaptation are aligned to those local climate actions and the planning of the cities. You also mentioned that one of the solutions as well is to understand climate change, right, in terms of the data, the analysis, vulnerability, and all of those scenarios that are very important when talking about financing interventions related to climate change. You mentioned as well the importance of creating bankable projects, right? So there will be investors that can be interested in really financing projects at the city level. And of course, I think one of the main points that you made is in terms of the green bonds, right? How the green municipal bonds and accessing to capital markets at the city level, it's very important to bring institutional investors, but also the private sector, right? So it can create a more sustainable, we'll say, goal in terms of climate financing. So it's good. I think one question for you is in terms of the tools. I know you mentioned at the end that there is the financial blueprints report. You also mentioned at the beginning the financial instruments toolkit, which I think it's very important to check out. And in terms of closing the gap between local climate action plans and the interventions, or aligning the local climate action plans with the national level plans, is there a tool that we can use that for cities to understand more about how we can overcome those challenges?
Good summary and very good question. Thank you so much, Marielle. Yes, I think beyond the tools you mentioned, I would also recommend participants to take a look at City Works, which is this tool developed by colleagues from GIZ to help cities develop their climate action plans. I would also recommend taking a closer look at IFC's Apex, which is a tool that was launched recently to help cities understand how to assess and decide upon their priorities for urban climate infrastructure. And then finally, I would like to also direct participants to the Net Zero Cities program by the European Union, which I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but is a very interesting program where basically the European Union is helping 100 cities overcome current structural, institutional, and cultural barriers in order to achieve climate neutrality by 2030. So that's Herculean effort that you're doing with 100 cities at the same time around Europe. And I think although it focuses a lot in Europe, they have on the website a wide range of resources which are available and can be accessed to all. And I'm sure there are also a lot of lessons learned that can be taken to the Latin American context.
Okay, thank you so much, Francisco. I think it has been a very good discussion. Now, for the audience, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this conversation, but also at the end of the case studies, in case you want to make questions for Francisco and Alfredo. So, Alfredo, now I would like to know more about the work that you are doing at the climate investment funds, because of the work that I also do at the IDB. I know very well the CIFs. So I think having an overall, perspective from your side on how the CIFs are supporting cities will be very helpful. And in specific, if you can also provide more information about the new Climate Smart Cities program of the CIFs, that will be something very interesting for the audience. And maybe I will have questions at the end. So Alfredo, over to you.
Wonderful, Mariel. My apologies for the dissonance between my eyes and my face. It's just that I have the presentation next to me and my camera wasn't working, unfortunately. I don't know if Karin, could you help me sharing the screen? Thank you so much. I'm going to do a very brief presentation. First of all, thank you, Mariel, and thank you to Inter-American Development Bank for this invitation. We're delighted to answer a few of these questions on the climate investment funds, Climate Smart Cities program that we're doing, or Climate Smart Urbanization program. So thank you very much, Karin. So basically here, we would like to just quickly introduce what the climate investment funds are. I promise this is just one slide, but I think not everyone knows exactly what we do. And we're one of the world leading multilateral climate funds. And I think that's very important because we've been delivering in parallel levels of climate finance already through more than 400 climate smart projects, with also over $11 billion of commitments so far since we were created in 2008. We are also taking on first mover risks and for new business and new investment models in multiple sectors. We're mobilizing partners, we're opening markets, we're catalyzing what we call transformational change in over 70 developing countries. And one of the ways that we're doing it is what you can see there on the screen is through catalyzing financing. For every dollar that the CIFs invest, between $8.5 and $11 are co-financed for our different projects and investment plans. How do we do that? We have a very particular business model, which is what you can see on the right side. We have a country-led multi-MDBs, so multilateral development banks, programmatic and participatory approach with flexible and predictable concessional finance that we can talk a little bit more later. But we're also a learning laboratory. We've been creating evidence, strong and robust evidence for over 10 years based on all these investments that we're doing. Next slide, please, Karim. At this point, I think that we don't necessarily need an explanation of the relevance of having investments in climate smart cities. But so there you have a few statistics about it, and it's definitely very important. But something that you will see around our presentation is that the Climate Smart Urbanization program is targeting already at least 20 small to medium-sized cities in developing countries. And those are basically defined between 100,000 and 4 million people. Why this at least 20? Because basically that's where urban infrastructure is not yet locked in, and where 60% of new urbanized land development is expected to take place by 2030. Next slide, please. What is our CIF's Climate Smart Urbanization or Climate Smart Cities program? It is a program that seeks to fill a gap in the landscape of relevant initiatives by focusing on delivering finance through a programmatic and participatory approach that leverages CIF's business model, the one that I presented, and also our partnership with multilateral development banks such as the IDB. Additionally, we try to ensure efficiency, effectiveness, and transformative impact through building on activities pursued by other initiatives as well and financiers, such as the City Climate Finance Gap Fund. And we try to provide on-demand support for identification and early stage preparation of climate smart urban projects. while you can see there are different 4 specific objectives, I think it's more important for us to land into some of the components and just try to see how do we focus this program that it's for climate investment plan. So next slide, please. The Climate Smart Urbanization Program basically will provide, again, concessional financing to around 20 cities under 3 specific selection criteria. Those are that they have, first, significant infrastructure deficits. Second, that they have credit worthiness, but bankability challenges. And third, that they have limited ability to attract private finance. This program aims to provide a comprehensive support package that we're going to talk a little bit later, from diagnostics to planning to financing investment at scale and supported by multilateral development bank partners. The program also plans to offer scaled and programmatic interventions focused on both mitigation and adaptation interventions, enabling cities' growth while enhancing climate change resilience and lowering emissions. Next slide, please. Our 3 components, and those are the ones that you're going to see, are basically taking this this approach that they can be either happen simultaneously in parallel, or they can have a phased approach, or as on a need basis. So what are those 3 components? The first one is a rapid city diagnostic, and as Francisco was mentioning, the requirement for data and climate data, particularly for these cities, is particularly important, and that's why it's one of the first components where we aim to identify and engage with beneficiary cities using efficient tools like the ones were presented to assess the city's exposure to climate risks, the level of preparedness, the gaps to mainstreaming climate-related considerations into urban planning, and investment pipeline development as well. The second component is the preparation of climate-informed strategic plans, strategic spatial plans, and other climate action plans on project pipeline development. This refers basically to prepare climate-informed spatial plans and other climate action plan at the city level, appropriate to context-specific circumstances and needs, for instance, being gender responsive as well, and reflecting the outcomes of the effective stakeholder engagement, including necessary interactions at the national level. This component includes multi-year strategically linked capital investment plans with a focus on developing a project pipeline for implementation. And the third component that this program is tackling is the implementation of catalytic investment projects. And that's one of CIP's characteristics throughout each one of the programs that we mentioned with that co-financing and in general on creating and opening markets through different sectors. So this component basically focuses on financing and implementing key catalytic investment projects as identified by cities. The priority here, for instance, will be given to strategically aligned projects that are both ambitious and transformational, and where concessional finance is needed to overcome certain barriers to meaningfully achieve these program objectives. Next slide, please. Some of the examples of the topics where this program will be investing are the ones that you see on the screen. So green and resilient buildings, sustainable transformation, water management, resilient coastal areas, land use planning, and a lot of other sectors. In some of the more detailed examples, we can see them on the next slide, please, Karim. And those are related, for instance, to urban informal settlement upgrade, nature-based solutions, rehabilitating eco-sensitive areas, sustainable cooling approaches, transit-oriented development corridors, and structuring financial vehicles, and a lot of other examples that you can imagine through all the multiple sectors that we mentioned before. And also, we're trying to do all of this investment. As of now, we're currently on a fundraising stage. And once we reach a minimum between $300 and $500 million, which it's ambitious, but very realistic as well, considering our precedents, we will be continuing to the next stages within the program on itself. And with that, more than happy to answer any questions or any comments. Thank you very much, Maria, and everyone.
Thank you, Alfredo. I think that this conversation aligns very well with what we were talking with Francisco, right, in terms of the supply side and how the CIFs, together with other climate funds, are supporting urban development and climate action at the urban level with concessional finance. So very interesting to see that this program is already building in current initiatives, right? It's not starting from zero, but it's also including and considering other initiatives and activities that that the program will support the identification of climate smart urban projects, which is also what Francisco was saying, that it's one of the main challenges. And also that it will focus on mitigation and adaptation and all the sectors that you mentioned at the end that the program will support. Interesting also to see the components, right? I think it aligns and it's with what Francisco was mentioning, and it will overcome some of the main challenges in terms of the city early diagnostic and the planning, and how it will be linked to the interventions, and how the program will support also the creation of a pipeline, right, which is aligned with the planning and also the implementation of the projects. So I think these conversations are very, insightful in terms of for the cities on how we can move forward with supporting urban development. There are already some questions in the Q&A chat, but I will leave those questions at the end of the case studies as well, but I already have some for you, Alfredo, and some for you, Francisco. So many thanks. I think now it's time to go to our case studies. And ahora me gustaría, voy a cambiar a español porque vamos a presentar los estudios
Now I'm going to go to English because we're going to present the studies in Spanish. And I would like to welcome Patricia Sanchez. Maria Camila already introduced Patricia, who is the Secretary of Housing in the City of Mendoza in Argentina. Thank you, Patricia, for being here in this discussion and for telling us how you are integrating in the budget of Mendoza a climate perspective, which has allowed you to have a grant from UN for climate investment. I think this is a very interesting case. You have the floor, Patricia. You are muted, Patricia.
Patricia, estás en mute.
Ahí estamos.
Listo.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias, Muriel.
Thank you, Mariel. I wanted to thank Maria Camila Uribe, who invited me to participate in this webinar to talk about the Mendoza case. I had the opportunity to meet her during the regional dialogue on policies given by the IDB in Cartagena de Indias for urban development. Now, before I talk about the case, the context of the city of Mendoza. We are the city of the province of Mendoza. We are also an international capital of wine. We have a population of 120,000 inhabitants, but we receive more than 450,000 people. So we have to serve a bigger population versus the amount of people who live in the city. The budget that we have for 2024, it's important to put it into context, is 36 billion Argentinian pesos, which is about $40 million. We would like to highlight the political role of Mr. Suarez, who is doing his second mandate. He told the neighbors to work on building a sustainable city. And for that, he promoted economic development with social inclusion. For this political decision, it was really important to talk about climate management, and this is a priority, and that's why we are the first municipality of the region beginning 2020, 1 month after he was elected. This was part of the planning understanding that climate action has to be based on evidence, and we updated the greenhouse effects, and we also created a committee for climate change with representatives from academia, research professionals, activists, and local government. To date, the goals have been satisfactorily fulfilled. So we are very proud of that, because now we have these goals for 2020. We were able to fulfill those goals in 3 years.
In these 4 years, we have decreased that with the green effect gas and also an important part of the economic activity. This is known as the climatic decoupling because it's been shown that it is possible to have economic growth with social inclusion and the decrease of emissions. Mid 2020, to talk about the case during the formulation of a budget for 2023 with the Deputy Secretary of the Environment. We wanted to include a climatic perspective. We were pioneers in the region. For that, we did the climate evaluation that we had done as part of the climate decree of 95 of 2020 and with the international context in climate change. And that says that the action calls for significant financial investment, considering that that is one of the challenges, which is reducing these greenhouse gases emissions. One of the main obstacles associated to this and the system for territorial management, and to that we incorporated this climate criteria in a context of mitigation, and we were able to be the first local government in Latin America to run this analysis for budgets. It is important to mention that our budget is funded with municipal rates and what we receive as royalties as part of the participation of the federal taxes given to us by the province. We also are the municipality that has the greatest autonomy. We have about 42% of our income coming from our own collection. But beyond all of these, we have been able to assign in 2023 52% for climate action. And of that 52%, we have 36% corresponding to measures to mitigate climate change and 26% that corresponds to adapting to climate change. We also would like to say that for this budget in 2024, that was increasing 56%, and the idea is to have budget after budget to increase this amount. All that is what allowed us to have this grant of $3 million from the United Nations for climate action. We entered into a macro agreement to receive this funding, and we're waiting to sign all the specific agreements. And what we have been receiving so far is the money for consulting. Also, I think it is important to talk about the process that we are running with the emission of green bonds. In 2022, we had financial agents for the municipality, and based on better improvement, and that we started in April 2023 the process to get authorization for debt, which is what we need through the law of tax responsibility in the Republic of Argentina. And through all this process, we have in April last year, we have started the period of indebtedness. In August last year, we have the authorization of a province. We had a political change, a government change, and we are still waiting to get the authorization from the Ministry of the Interior and the Ministry of Economy of the nation. So far we haven't been able to issue them. But we have been working with Banco de Galicia, which is our financial agent, and we have placed we have two projects. The most important one is the solar park yard, which is located to the west of Mendoza, the city. The amount for that is 500 million pesos. Last year, the amount represented the salary mass, the whole salary mass for the municipality. Today is just half of that due to the inflation we've had in Argentina. So that's why we think these two projects, we are going to have just one, which is the solar yard, because the other one was interventions in various parts in Mendoza. The project of a solar yard is associated to a generation distribution system that has a system connected to the distribution grid, and the power energy is a complement to what we get. Here we generate economic savings and based on photovoltaic, and as I said, the same bond is based on an installation of solar panels in about 500 kilowatts of nominal power. The objective is to give the consumption for the municipality using sustainable and clean energy. At the beginning, we have about 752,000 kilowatts hour. This calculus is based on a preliminary design that we made, and also talking about the equipment. The other project that we don't think we're going to be able to do because we don't have enough funding is kilowatts for public spaces. And I think this project we're not going to be able to comply with because we're only going to be able to get funding for the solar yards. It was also important that we have created a green fund for sustainability. We have funding from our financial agent that is going to contribute $32,000 from 2023 to 2025. And all this is to fund research projects and for all the needs to the climate management in Mendoza be filled. Thank you very much. Thank you, Patricia. It's been a very interesting case, and also knowing how 52% of the budget you have is going to be used to climate management between mitigation. I got you to getting the 3 million from UN. That is also through GEF, right? So how we can link that to the climate funds, the experience you have with green bonds for this solar yard and the creation of a green bond that green fund that talks about the progress made by Mendoza. Now we're going to give the floor to Marco Antonio. So I will read the questions in a minute, but let's give the floor to Marco Antonio. It is a pleasure to have you here in this conversation. For you to please tell us about the innovative financial instruments Baja California, Mexico are being implemented with all the experience you have also in this topic. It will be very interesting for other cities and the audience for us to be able to see how we can replicate Baja California's case. And I understand that this shows how we can bring investment regarding green structures for the cities. Okay, a pleasure. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. Baja California is an important state in the northwest part of the country. It has about 4 million inhabitants. 2/3 are in the coastal area, especially in the Tijuana city. It concentrates a little bit over 50% of the population. 95% of the water supply received by the coastal area depends on the Colorado River, which is a system where we have 7 states of the American Union, and we as Baja California under an international treaty where 35% of the water from the Colorado River seems that has over a hydric stress due to a drought for the last 20 years. This, under the agreements of the international treaty, has implications on reducing availability of water supply that we receive from the Colorado River through the treaty that keeps levels under 30% of storage. We're talking about the traditional volume. This, of course, has resulted in us trying to find the mechanisms that will allow us to give permanence and security to the water supply of the coastal area, which is the vital part of the economic activity of the state. We are facing significant challenges due to the draw of Colorado River and other effects of climate change. And here, the government strategies are aligned to the sustainability concepts. So we could not remove the funding strategies and the needs for significant resources to approach these effects of the climate change. So we have been working for over a year in placing a green bond, sustainable green funding of 3,000 million pesos, and a gender funding with the approach of reduction of the existing gender differences that we continue to have in the country for 500 million pesos. This mechanism of sustainable funding of 3,000 million for green projects and 300 million for gender projects we have placed in the Mexican market through the participation of NASMA as the financial agent of the state with very interesting conditions for the state. And that has allowed us to take all that pipeline of projects that are pending execution that we have regarding water supply. 100% of the projects considered in this model of green funding is projects of the hydric sector, the water sector. So we have the possibility to, with this 3,000 million pesos and additional resources, where we are adding to the resources of the green bond of the IPA, since it is a borderline state, we share a series of problems of the water sector with the United States. And we have the possibility to have access to additional resources of funding of the federal government of the United States and Mexico, like FONADIN and CONAGUA, and also resources from the government organizations plus private equity to with the idea to increase these 3,000 million pesos of the green bond that we are thinking of as a seed capital to generate about 9,000 million pesos for a project to give a very important power to this. And that way, address this pipeline we have regarding water supply by sanitation, reusing water, improving the water conduction, and other projects that we have for desalinization that represent a new source of supply for the state. The green bond, as the biggest part of the projects of infrastructure of this nature, had a significant challenge regarding structuring, but at the end of the day, the placing model allowed us to have a lot better advantages if compared to the traditional credit mechanisms, because we got 30 years to pay these grace periods of 3 years, interest rates that are very a lot better, the conditions for financial guarantee also in better conditions than the one these infrastructure projects receive in Mexico. So Baja California is coming from a very limited process of investment in the water sector for the last decade, if you will. There were no investments there. So the resources that we need are important. Baja California has a consolidated budget that is about $6,000 million on a yearly basis. We get these resources for water projects that is about $200 million, but we are triplicating that because we need to cover that gap in investment and resources. It's been a total success, the process, and we have been able to incorporate additional elements to the model of funding management that have been really positive. We have a technical investment committee that covers the main dependencies of the state government infrastructure, taxes, the environment, etc. But also we have a specialized consultant that is hired by NAVNA and the financial broker that allows us to compete so that we can present projects, and those projects that have make a lot more sense from the social and economic standpoints are the ones that receive enough funding to happen. And on the other hand, we organize with the water operating organizations a repay model that will allow us to define key indicators, KPIs of these organizations. And for example, if an organization is complying with, is meeting these KPIs regarding governance, financial, and commerce that are set in the agreement with the state government, then the resources that are equivalent to the portion of the repayment that organization would have to pay, we give them back as a revolving model of investment to try to avoid this process of lack of investment that has happened. The other leg of the funding part, which is contained within the framework of the state sustainable funding, is for gender productive projects that will allow us to cover that pipeline that continues to happen in Mexico, unfortunately. So generally speaking, in a nutshell, a funding mechanism with a green approach to serve projects that add about 9,000 million pesos, reduce the gap that we have regarding water availability for the coastal area. The challenge has been, as in all these types of projects, in my opinion, is structuring the international markets. The International Development Bank has enough resources to serve this type of project, and the challenge is always is structuring the financial and technical structure of the projects.
Maestro Marco Antonio, muchísimas gracias porque me parece.
Marco Antonio, Master, thank you very much. I have a lot of questions. I don't want to, monopolize the conversation, but we are very interesting. Maria Camila started talking of giving us some context by replicating. I think you summarized what the IDB is trying to replicate also for other cities. Not just the green bond wise, but how this green bond intends to have other resources from EPA, also CONAGUA, another private agency of 3,000 million Mexican pesos can help them get 9,000 million pesos for projects. Understood everything you're doing in adaptation and reuse of water, desalination process. I understand there is a significant pipeline of projects. The fact that the state is linking that to governance, having a committee, a technical committee where you have the financial agent and a specialized agent that allows projects to see which has more sustainability, efficiency, and continuity. And I also think one of the most interesting things is the models that you're doing about repayment based on performance. So they have to, meet some milestones or indicators will have a benefit for the end operator in the project by increasing the technical capabilities and also for governance, implementation, and operation. That links to the success of our projects and for them to be sustainable, scalable, and they can be repeated in the future. In the end, I think it is a success story. It is too soon, I think, but in terms of how this summarizes the transformational change Alfredo mentioned. At the end of the day, is how the operation can be linked to the financial instrument piece. And that question I have, I'm going to go to the audience questions, is how is this included in the climate action plans of the state, Marco Antonio? I think it is a big effort regarding budget, and also know for the audience how that is part of the plans of the climate action, what you're doing. Transparency and the ENG's criteria, we think is a fact. They are profitable by themselves, and that allows us to create sustainable mechanisms throughout time. In the case of the green bond model, we have a bi-yearly report to the Congress. We go to the Congress and talk to them because in their sovereignty, they gave us the authorization to get the resources, the way these resources are being invested. So far, we have invested about 50% of the resources of the green bond. And because of the conditions of placement, we're having a financial benefit that is very interesting regarding the interest rate that we currently have, because of the financial investment that continues, that is expecting finance, and the financial cost of the resources. Now, regarding climate action, all the investments derived from the green bond go through this technical investment committee, and they are linked to the objectives of the Secretariat of the Environment, which is the agency that in the state government coordinates in a cross-cutting manner that all purposes that have an impact, an environmental impact, have to be measured and with a follow-up approach. Very clear, Marco Antonio. Thank you very much for your answer. Now we're going to go to the questions from the audience. We have questions for our panelists. We have one for Francisco.
When one has to work with 86 institutions, it will end up with increased transaction cost and fewer autonomy to cities to decide what to do with the finance help. What do you think about it?
Sorry, Mariel, could you repeat? I think I got a bit cut in the translation.
Yeah, when one has to work with 86 institutions, it will end up with increased transaction cost and fewer autonomy to cities to decide what to do with the finance help. What do you think about it? It relates to the 86 institutions you are working with, but yeah, I think it's like to provide more clarification about it.
Yes, no, I think it's a great question, and maybe, yes, I should indeed clarify. So just to get everyone on the same page, so CCFLA is this multi-level, multi-stakeholder coalition of institutions where we are working with all the different institutions that are helping implement urban climate infrastructure worldwide, finance this infrastructure, build the capacity needed for this infrastructure, and disseminate the knowledge needed to inspire more cases of this infrastructure, right? So we're talking here about all different kinds of institutions like the multilateral development banks, private investors like asset managers, private banks. We're talking about some national governments, United Nations systems, NGOs, think tanks. So we have all this wide range of institutions we are working with. And indeed, it can be challenging working with that many stakeholders. And well, we do that by really making it clear how what we are doing can add value to what these stakeholders are after, right? So we work with our stakeholders, again, around knowledge, collaboration, and advocacy. Of course, some stakeholders are a bit more interested in one topic than another. For example, we have quite a big group that is working around project preparation, right? Where we have many other project preparation facilities that are helping cities develop their projects. We have also many MDBs quite involved, and have this, let's say, group, which is a bit smaller, maybe around 20, 30 institutions that are discussing and coordinating change in this direction. Still, it's a big effort, but I think, yeah, the best way to do this is to try to align the discussions we are having, what is the interest of our members, to ensure that what we're doing is adding value and consolidating knowledge and helping broker partnerships.
Thank you, Francisco. It was very clear. And now we have a question for Alfredo. If you could let us know if PNUD, for example, can be one of the beneficiaries of the climate investment funds, or another agency of the United Nations.
That is a good question. I think overall, what the climate smart cities or climate smart urbanization program is targeting is mostly cities. We're trying to do it through multiple innovative financial mechanisms. So we're trying to, while obviously using traditional ones such as grants or concessional loans or very low interest loans, we're trying to do a combination. For instance, we're trying to have some of the investments, when they come in the future, they will be probably targeted through either funnel through national governments or directly targeting local governments with the approval of national governments. We're also envisioning green bonds. But I mean, it will be particularly difficult to fund a United Nations program on itself. But what I would believe is that would be important is the UN agency works together with one of the cities that will be applying for the expression of interests for this program. Then that's for sure will be considered. I don't think we will fund directly UN agencies, but for sure, if they tag along for technical assistance, for capacity building, or for co-financing of any activity, I think that would definitely enhance the possibilities of a program happening in the climate smart cities or funded by this program.
Thank you, Alfredo. And now we have a question for Patricia. Patricia, el público quisiera saber un poco más de cómo está conformado el fondo.
The people would like to know how that green bond is made up for sustainability you talked about. The green bond, as I said, we, with our aid of financial broker, through the area they have in the Bank for Sustainability, in offer improvement, they made a proposal to us allocate funds to a green bond. So the contribution comes from the agent, that is $32,000, and it's going to be applied from 2023 to 2025. Okay, so yeah, I think it's clear. There's a couple of questions, but maybe now I have some for Marco. With these 3,000 million Mexican pesos that the bond is raising, how many projects are being funded? It is a lot of projects, relevant projects. We're talking about 6, 7 wastewater treatment plants to be reused. We have in Tecate, Mexicali, 2, 3 in Tijuana, 2 in Senap. So Baja California is an entity that has very few municipalities. We have 7. We are receiving resources in almost all communities and projects that are almost all communities. Now, talking about the bond green of resources, the idea is to bring that up to 9,000 million pesos. It's projects associated to reuse of water, making the water drinkable, and all the structure of distribution of the state was really bad because of lack of investment. So, and it was crazy to bring water from Colorado River, use electricity, and then lose a lot of the water throughout this road due to the failures of the equipment of the distribution, water distribution. And the other additional projects that are not considered to be funded with the resources of the green bond, which is the desalinization plants, and we have 2 projects that we're looking for participation of a private equity in PPP or APP projects that will allow us to accelerate the processes of the resources that will allow us to make the investment in as short time as possible. A question. The people would like to know, our audience would like to know more. It is more in terms of access and all the logistics and governance issuing bonds means. How can a country issue these bonds, and what should be the path to do that, and who are the investors that are willing to buy them? Do we have global guidelines, or they have to go through the local regulation? The law regulating funding for subnational entities is the financial discipline law, and it says that states and municipalities in Mexico's case can have access to funding through the traditional market of a Mexican financial market, and it also gives the possibility of issuing debt through non-traditional financial markets. In this case, issuing bonds can issue that through the stock market or also through private placement. What we did in Baja California is generate a decree, which is the authorization of the Congress, of the sovereignty of the Congress, in this case for Baja California, that allows us to go and get the resources to serve productive public investment. Public funding in Mexico is limited for it to be aimed at productive public investment. You cannot take funding for current expense, and this has to be aligned to an administrative process with the Secretary of a Federal Public Decree. We have several alternatives. So what we did was to prepare a decree that would allow us to move under the alternative that would give us the best condition. In some occasions, the stock market is not going through the best time in terms of liquidity, or they have the intent of fixing very aggressive conditions in terms of the volume of financial guarantees the state has to grant to have good funding conditions. So we did some scouting, we roadshow, we did a similar what's done in private placements of corporate finances and trying to get the best condition possible. So at the end of the day, what we did was we had a private placement where that NADVAC is an agent whose owners is the American government and the Mexican government, and that allowed us to get the best conditions if we compare that to the stock market or the traditional loan market. For example, this green bond issuance, we didn't have to have federal participations of the state as guarantees. We just did that with the guarantee of local tax income. That is a complex process. It is a process that is novel in terms of the subnational entities. It is not simple. It took us about a year, that preparation process, and we also got the support of the Secretaría de Hacienda and Crédito Público, especially the tax secretariat, in terms of structuring the taxonomy and the framework to be able to issue the sustainable funding that allowed us to have certain acceleration into the process. Otherwise, had we started from scratch, it would have gone a lot slower. I think it is very clear, Marco Antonio. Thank you very much. And very interesting, again, the experience. We have 6 more minutes to close the Q&A session. So we still have time for one question per panelist. Francisco, we're going back to you.
Any methodologies for evaluating the sustainable impact of climate finance? That's the first question, and then we have another one for you as well in terms of which could be the main variables in terms of to know if a project is attractive for investors or not.
Great
Francisco.
questions again. Great audience. Well, I think I'll first start answering the second question about what are the main elements, right, for making projects attractive to investors. So it really depends on the case by case, but I think what we recommend is thinking that investors want to have return with low risks, right? So it's very important to think about the risk return of your opportunity, which means trying to consider all kinds of risks, for example, political, right? You don't want your project to be stopped because, for example, it doesn't quite align with the priorities set by the other levels of government, or because it's even against some kind of regulation. So it's very important to have this political framework in place to ensure that there's no such kind of risk. Then it's also very important to have the technical requirements in place, thinking here about different kinds of documents, authorizations, if you need to build something, for example. All these will be taken into consideration by different investors. Other sources of risk come, for example, from or even like, let's say, even I think more the benefit, right, of the product comes from the impact, right? Investors would like to have their money going to something they think is super powerful, that is really making the difference. So it's important that it's very well quantified, the impact of a project in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So again, important to tie it in well with the climate inventory that the city is making. And also, of course, consider the impacts of the project in terms of vulnerability assessment, right? So how is it actually helping address vulnerability concerns of the local population? Then moving to the revenue side, it's important to think very, very clearly about the revenue streams. I think that's a bit of what we see as the main challenge of many projects, is that they don't have quite clear what is the main revenue stream, like how this project is going to make money and pay back the investors, right? This is, for example, I think one main constraint or one of the main factors preventing the upscale of adaptation or nature-based solutions projects, for instance. And of course, it's very important to think about the mechanics of the instrument, right? To ensure that the instrument really fits what the investors will be looking for. So some investors prefer to invest in SPVs, other goes for bonds, other PPPs. So again, having this established connection with potential finances from the beginning is very important. In terms of sustainability of climate finance, I think there are quite interesting organizations working in certification of infrastructure projects that would be worth taking a look at. Just on top of the mind, a gold standard, I think, provides quite a clear framework to ensure that projects really have the impact that they portray, and also Fast Infra is helping ensure that infrastructure projects really deliver against our climate ambitions.
Many thanks, Francisco. And now I have a question for Alfredo. Alfredo, the audience also would like to know more about how we can link just transition with, the climate, the new climate programs that the CIF is supporting. And I know that CIF is doing a lot on just transition, right? Not only in terms of gender aspects, but also just transition as general, including several other important aspects. So if you can let us know more about it, how CIF is linking just transition with the new programs and the current programs, and specifically the Smart Cities program.
Thank you very much, Mario, for that question, and for the audience overall. I think that's a wonderful question. Before getting there, let me just complement something Francisco mentioned, that from the Climate Investment Fund's perspective, also a way to assess impact, it's basically through the transformational change framework. We are at a point where climate change cannot just deal with incremental change, but we need to start thinking about what is the transformational change that we need for achieving, for instance, the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degrees Celsius. So and that there's a whole framework within CIF, or that has been elaborated through its community of practice, which includes different dimensions. It has to be systemic change, scale, speed, relevance. There are certain signals that you have to see, and all of that can be seen through multiple documents that the Transformational Change Learning Partnership has elaborated with through CIF. But going through to your specific question, Marielle, and from the audience on just transitions, just transition is also part of a big topic that CIF tackles. And basically what we try to do is every single investment plan and every project will receive feedback from multiple parts of the CIF Secretariat and the TFCs and other instances. And we try to always, and I mean, we have a framework for just transition and an initiative called Just Transition Initiative that basically has already modeled multiple toolkits that can be used through project design and preparation instances, but also we apply them ourselves to those investment plans, to the projects. So I would strongly recommend that if you're interested in just transition topics and how we integrated them into programs, the Smart Cities or others, that you quickly Google CIF, Just Transition Initiative. I think the toolkits will definitely be super helpful, all the way from economic analysis to stakeholder engagement to multiple things and how to tackle stakeholder. And also we have case studies for those. We have strong deep dives in multiple sectors, like a water management case for Bolivia, considering the region we're speaking about. And there are multiple tools that you can take from that Just Transition Initiative for sure.
Thank you, Alfredo. Cerramos con dos últimas intervenciones.
Now we're going to close with a question for Marco. If the bonds are guaranteed by the government, are they? Otherwise, what is the income base considered for bond emission? Yeah, bonds are guaranteed with state tax resources. We did a process of preparation, and in November in 2022, we opened the law of state income, which is a yearly law. We increased the water rates And we created an overcharge, a surcharge that will allow us to have this to show the financial agents and the agencies that we had enough money when we were going to start. So the important part of this type of exercise is the preparation process and structuring. That has a lot to do with the fact that many of the subnational entities, even though it looks it is not possible, they don't have the elements, the substantive elements that are enough to be able to compete in the market for a placement of this nature. For example, lack of financial information that is supported by an international audit firm that will allow them to know that the figures are authentic and that they have a robust evaluation process through good mechanisms. But they are guaranteed, yes, with a small percentage of the payroll tax, which is the main local income. Thank you. Now, to close, Patricia, what recommendation or final message can you give to other officials of local governments that want to start with this climate action in cities? I think it is very important to work in the perspective that we had. Budget-wise, halfway through the year, we start talking about that. So work jointly with the environment areas. I think it is the disciplinary areas. We work with the tax authority, and we also need indicators, project execution, the environmental work, especially in an interdisciplinary manner within the municipality. Okay, thank you, Patricia. I want to say that there is a lot of congratulations to all panelists for Francisco, Alfredo, Patricia, and Marco. They congratulate you a lot on these cases and also the analysis that we mentioned and what the funds are doing. So I would like to convey that message. We have 420 people connected now, and so we have the recording. So we've had a great reach, and I think the conversation has been really fruitful and meaningful. Now, Maria Camila will give us the closing remarks. Thank you all. Thank you, Mariela, and thank you all the people that were here today, especially the wonderful speakers that made possible this very fruitful conversation, which has also been of inspiration for our cities. Thank you for sharing with us your perspectives and the experiences to see how we can strengthen access to climate funding in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is also necessary to recognize the mechanisms to move forward in local climate projects. What do we need to be able to fund? The specific experiences that we had today about these two experiences in Mendoza and Baja California are very good because they prove that this is possible, and they give us the idea that local climate action is connected to the communities, is linked to the communities when they understand the challenges they face, but also how they can design funding mechanisms. I hope these experiences and lessons from our panelists have been to your interest so that we can move forward in a better multi-level coordination for climate action. And now to close, maybe what I would like is to invite you all to answer the following questions. We're going to give you a couple of minutes. Please help me scan the QR code that you see on the screen, and there you will have the question to ask you to please help us answer this question about today's webinar. Thank you all very much. Please scan the QR code and answer the question. We don't see the results here. We don't see these results. I'm gonna say goodbye by thanking you all for joining us today and in this series of webinars. And we hope we will see you for our May series. Thank you very much and have a great day.